Hi everyone, welcome to our short 10 to 15 minute video on Unit 503, Principles of Managing and Leading Individuals and Teams to Achieve Success. I'm going to hand over to our tutor James, who's going to talk you through the assignment. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Charlotte. Okay, so with this particular unit, we're just going to run through the questions one by one and give a few tips around how we might answer them. There are quite a few different questions here and lots of detail in how we're going to answer the questions. So I'll try my best to give you some structure and some approach here that will work and make your work more efficient too. So our first learning outcome here is to understand approaches to managing and leading teams. And to begin with, we're asked to evaluate theoretical models used for managing and leading teams. So as we go through this assignment, I'm going to recommend that you might consider using our 3 golden rules for answering these academic questions. And the first one is to make any definitions, any key terms in the question that we might want to define and make clear. The second one is making sure that we are aware of what the command verb is, and we're going to answer the question in that way. The command verb is the first word or two of the question. It tells you how you are requested to answer the question in structural terms. And the final rule is less is more, and there's plenty of chance to apply each of those 3 rules as we go through the first 3 questions on the assignment here, which I'll run through. So first question, evaluate theoretical models used for managing and leading teams. Let's apply the rules. First of all, any terms that we need to define here. So for me, I'd be tempted to put in a definition of what we mean by teams here, because the whole first learning outcome is based on managing and leading teams and managing team leaders. So a team seems obvious, doesn't it? But what do we really mean by a team? How is a team different from just a group of people? Or, what do we mean by a team? You don't need a big definition here, but I think just starting off the assignment with just a brief definition of what we mean by a team in organizational context is not a bad place to start. The command verb here is to evaluate, and we have a list of command verb definitions here we can refer to. So evaluate is to consider strengths and weaknesses, arguments for and against, and perhaps similarities and differences. We then need to judge the evidence from different perspectives to make a conclusion or judgment. And if we can apply some research or theory to support that, that will be good. So for 1.1, it's asking you to select a number of different theoretical models and evaluate each of them. So what do you think of those models in how effective they are in managing and leading teams? This is what the question is asking you to do. And we're going to further apply a less is more approach here by selecting a specific number of models here. And I'm going to suggest you choose perhaps 2 to 4 different models, specifically different models, and evaluate each of them. So hopefully if we break that all down, nice definition of what we mean by a team, we're going to perform an evaluation, which means you need to have a reasoned judgment on what you think about the models. And we're going to select between 2 and 4 of those models to perform the evaluation against. And that should help to give you some structure in your answer here. In indicative content, it suggests you might look at things like Tenenbaum and Schmidt's leadership continuum, the managerial grid. It could be emotional intelligence by Daniel Goleman. There are various different models you could use. These are just indications of the kind of thing you might look at. But anything that you think does the job of managing and leading teams, you could use here. So I can think of situational leadership from Blanchard and Hersey, for example. There are various other models you might want to bring in here, but you're going to select 2 to 4 different models. You're going to evaluate each of them in terms of how well you think they manage and lead teams in the workplace. So that's kind of question 1.1. 1.2 then, we're going to discuss practical approaches for effective team management and leadership. Probably nothing here to define if you define teams already above, but now we're going to discuss some practical approaches. Now, if I look at discuss, this is to give a detailed account, including a range of views or opinions. That's important. So to perform a discussion, we want to look at selecting, again, 2 to 4 different practical approaches and discuss each of them in turn. So this is where they're strong, where they're maybe not so strong, what the implications of them might be. Trying to look at the same approach from different perspectives is what the question requires here. And indicative content here, the kind of practical approaches you could consider would be setting clear aims and objectives, delegation, how we manage conflicts, how we create trust in the environment, how we build a resilient team, how we collaborate effectively, how we develop the team. So there's lots of different things in there that you could consider might add up to effective team management leadership. If it helps you to really refine this, you might think about, okay, what's ineffective perspective in team management leadership. And the opposite of that then is the kind of stuff you might want to look at in your discussion. But don't forget the different perspectives on the different approaches. This is a key thing. 2 to 4 different approaches, discuss each of them. That's what the question's asking us to do. 1.3, we're asked to analyze strategies for managing team leaders. Let's apply our rules again. I think here it's probably worthwhile just being clear on what we mean by team leaders. There's a specific meaning behind that. What does a team leader do? Where do they operate in the organization? What do we mean by team leader? Once we've got that, then we're thinking, okay, what are the different ways in which team leaders may be managed? So again, performance monitoring, delegation, target setting, how we supervise, learning and development approaches, all that kind of thing. And then we're going to analyze those different approaches for managing team leaders. And we're going to analyze, back to our command verb definitions, by breaking the thing up into separate parts and examining each part in some detail. Again, if you can try and bring any current research or theory to support analysis, that's helpful. So we're looking at of the different ways in which team leaders may be managed. What do we think about them, again, in terms of what makes them work, what might be effective? Do we have any lived experience maybe underneath that? Have you seen things happen that have worked well and things that haven't worked well? And what might be the most important things to consider when we're looking at team leader management? That's kind of 1.3. We'll then move on to learning outcome 2, knowing how to achieve a balance of skills and experience in teams. 2.1, discuss techniques, which is a plural again, so we need more than one, for assessing current and future team capabilities and requirements. So here, there's nothing particularly to define. I think you've already defined what teams are in 1.1 previously, but we are asked to identify different techniques for how we assess current and future team capabilities and requirements, and then discuss those techniques. So that, again, a discussion is to look at different perspectives on the same thing. What the pros and cons might be, just different perspectives on what a particular technique might bring into the organization. So indicative content again here covers things like analysis of skills and experience against current organizational requirements. In a real sense, you might consider here how well we identify future organizational needs. It could be a project, it could be a plan, it could be an organizational strategy, which then leads straight into the kind of people and skills that we need to fulfill the project or the plan or the strategy. So we can make a linkage very clearly there. We might think around doing skills matrices. So what is our current pool of people able to do? This is a way of assessing perhaps current team capabilities, and what might the gaps be between current capabilities and future requirements, I think is the best way to think about this. So you're asked to think of more than one technique. I'd advise you to think of, again, 2 techniques, maybe 3, and discuss each of those techniques separately in the job of doing that assessment of current and future. Don't forget in this question, you need to cover off both assessing current capabilities and future requirements as well. So we need particular techniques that do both of those things in your answer to 2.1. In 2.2, assess the factors which impact on the selection of learning and development activities for individuals and teams. And again, the same thing we'll go into here. There's nothing necessarily to define here, I would say, looking at the question maybe. We're asked to assess, that's our command verb. Let's look what that means. This is to provide a reasoned judgment or rationale of the standard, quality, value, or importance of something informed by relevant facts or rationale. For here, we're going to identify the factors that impact on what we do in learning and development for individuals and teams. We'll also assess the factors. So to what extent do you think that factor really drives selection of learning and development activities? How important is that factor? What are the things about the factor that matter? And what might we bring out of that as the kind of most useful areas to think around when we're selecting learning and development activities? So is it budget? Is it our environment, our culture? Is it our industry, the tasks we're asking people to do? Is it people's appetite for coaching and mentoring? Is our ability to coach and mentor? Is it that we've got I'm going to come on to this later on, but it could be that your workforce is quite dispersed or remote. That might, again, be a factor that impacts on selection, learning and development activities. Try, if you can, answer here to make sure you've covered off and referenced both individual learning and development activities and team learning and development activities as well. If you cover both of those in the answer, you've met the question squarely. On to learning outcome 3 now. We're going to hear no techniques for managing and leading individuals and teams to achieve success. Now we're going to move on to more of a performance-based idea here. How are we managing and leading performance and success in the team? So in terms of 3.1 then, examine methods used to monitor and manage individual and team performance. We've got both individual and team again in this question. You might be tempted here to define what we mean by performance, because performance means lots of things to different people. And is it just the ability to hit a short-term target, or are we thinking about sustainability over time here? You might just want to put a short definition of what you think performance means here for individuals and for teams, because that idea can vary a little bit. And we're going to identify and then examine some different methods of how we monitor and manage individual and team performance. So our obvious things here would be things like key performance indicators, how those are reported back to people, performance management regimes, service level agreements, feedback that we generate, disciplinary procedures and managing lower performance you might think of here as well, audits, customer feedback, all that kind of thing. So the best thing here probably is to try to use things you're familiar with, because we've all been in environments that have had some kind of attempt to monitor and manage your performance there. So what's worked, what hasn't worked in your experience, or perhaps, if you can find some research under accepted methods, what does research indicate works best for individuals? So there's a lot of interesting stuff, for example, now around how motivation works. Individual performance might vary between people. People might be motivated by different things. And a lot of the old kind of carrots and sticks, incentives and threats approach, we don't think works particularly well, particularly when we're looking at complex or long-term tasks. So there is some research we can dig into there to take this apart a little bit. You have to examine those methods. So again, this means to inspect it thoroughly to determine its nature or condition. So really dig into the methods. How do they work? How do they not work sometimes? What's required to make them work? So for example, if we're going to use some kind of KPI system to manage performance, well, are we measuring the right KPIs, or are we just measuring anything we can measure? And is it effective then? So there is some interesting things to think about here. Again, idea would be less is more. Select just 2 to 3 different specific methods that might be used to manage individual and team performance. Try and cover both those off in the answer somewhere, individual and team, and then make sure you pick those methods apart in some detail to look at what's required to make them work, what some of the problems or assumptions might be around them, and that would do a good job of 3.1. 3.2, develop approaches to respond to the challenges of managing and leading multidisciplinary and remote teams. There's quite a bit going on with this question. I think there's nothing to define here particularly. I think we know what we mean by multidisciplinary or remote teams. My advice here would be to first identify what you think the key challenges would be. It mentions some of the indicative content here, so it could be communication, access to support, developing relationships, workload management between people who aren't working together, conflict and conflict handling, and all the other things you can see in the indicative content here, trust breaking down, morale. Different personalities work differently in different teams. Different personalities work differently remotely as well. Some people love being sat at home working on spreadsheets all day. Other people just crave contact with other people. It just lands differently. That might be one of the challenges you talk about. What are the major challenges that you think could exist or exist through experience? Once you've got some 2, 3, 4 maybe key challenges that cover both multidisciplinary and remote teams, you're able to develop approaches to respond to them. So given that challenge, what do you think we might do to try to respond to those challenges to make the situation better? That's what you're asked to do for learning outcome 3. So develop usually means we're going to take a starting point, which is, okay, what challenges do we see? And then from the challenge, we develop out an approach to try and improve it. That's to develop. 3.3 then finishes off as examine good practice for enabling and supporting individuals and teams to achieve success. This is a bit of a wrap up, really. So it would be what works best for individuals and teams to achieve success. What do we mean by success? We'll probably back into our ideas of performance from 3.1, maybe sustainable success, achieving outputs with the resources we have, that kind of thing. What do we need to do that stuff really well for individuals and for teams? So we could talk about the clarity, the shared purpose, vision and direction. We could talk around setting goals correctly so they're not too far away to be unbelievable and unachievable, but not so close that they're too easy either. We might talk about rewards, incentive, recognition. These are really important things in the contemporary workplace to get right. Do we know about what motivates, what demotivates people the longer term? How we use action planning, performance improvement, feedback and constructive criticism. There's a lot here. Incentives and and rewards, role modeling from management leadership, all that kind of stuff comes into place here. What we're going to do is examine what we think those key elements are for enabling and supporting individuals and teams to achieve success in the organizations and teams over time. And to do the examination, don't forget, it's just to inspect that thing thoroughly to determine its nature or condition. And that's the whole assignment pretty much done there. The key things here, just to wrap up, would be make sure that you've paid attention to the command verbs throughout, because they're a little bit different in here. So providing a list of stuff will not be enough. You're going to have to provide some discussion or evaluation or analysis around some of these areas that goes beyond the list. And make sure throughout that you considered this common theme of both individuals and teams in your answers. And I think that would be a good way just to make sure you're meeting the questions really well.
Thank you very much, James. We hope that you found that helpful. If you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me on cmi@impd.co.uk, and we look forward to receiving your assignment soon. Thank you very much.